Welcome to the Abundant Wellness Podcast. I'm Andrea, registered nurse, functional health practitioner, author, and mom navigating the very real trenches of parenting kids with sensitive, complex nervous systems. This podcast is for parents who are tired of being told to just try harder, who feel the grief of realizing you can't fix your child, but still refuse to believe that this is the end of your story. Here, we talk about what actually helps: nervous system informed parenting, functional health, the gut-brain connection, emotional resilience, and faith in the middle of the mess. See, you're raising a child who's not broken, but deeply wired. My hope is that every episode helps you to feel less alone, more anchored, and better equipped to support both yourself and your child. If you're ready for compassionate science, honest conversations, and hope that doesn't bypass reality, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hey everybody, so today's episode is going to be tender and soft and maybe also hard to engage in. And so I want to invite you into the conversation of navigating Mother's Day as a parent of a child with special needs. If Mother's Day feels heavy for you, if it doesn't look like the pictures that you see online, if there's grief, exhaustion, or even resentment mixed in, this episode is for you, because you can love your child deeply and still feel a lot of sadness today. You can be grateful and grieving at the same time. So let's dive in. First, let's just be honest. Mother's Day comes with a whole host of expectations, having neurotypical children or not. And it can also come with a lot of baggage. It can be complex depending on what your relationship with your mother is like, with your mother-in-law. If you have a mom or a mother-in-law, I know that my relationship with my mom was very complex for a long time and hits very differently now that she's gone, primarily because of the nature of our relationship and being no contact for several years before her passing. It's a very big mix of emotions. So you might already be coming into motherhood with your own parenting journey being complex for you. And then you add on to it, on top of all of those expectations, right? We see the picture perfect, Instagram perfect Mother's Day, right? And you're looking at your life thinking, there's no way that Mother's Day gets to be relaxing for me. It doesn't get to be enjoyable for me. It's hard for me, because you have a child that's wired differently. So let's talk about that. There are lots of reasons why Mother's Day might hit differently for you. And this is coming from a nervous system lens, okay? So we have the journey of special needs parenting, which means that you're under a chronic stress load already. And then if you have other expectations put on top of you, on top of that stress load, it's not going to feel like a holiday. It's going to feel like a work party that you're responsible for, right? Then you have, again, those holidays, the increased expectations, and not only that, but they're expectations that your child might not be able to meet because of their sensory needs, their emotional needs, where they're at in their, like in our case, where she was at in her healing journey really did determine whether or not we were going to do something special that day. The nervous system interprets this as pressure, comparison, and potential failure, especially if you're hosting or you're also trying to meet the expectations of your mom, your mother-in-law, etc. So a dysregulated nervous system does not set you up for the ability to enjoy Mother's Day. It doesn't. It puts you in a place of constantly being on edge, constantly protecting yourself. You're trying to show up for other people. You're trying to show up for yourself. And at the end of the day, it just doesn't even feel worth it. When your body doesn't feel safe, this is the thing that I want you to take away from this. It cannot access joy, even on a day that was meant to celebrate you. Okay. So I want you to hang with me through this episode, because towards the end, I'm going to be sharing some strategies on how to protect this holiday, how to work through some things related to the complexities around it, so that it can be a day of rest and comfort and nourishment for you as well. Why this hits differently, kind of like I mentioned before, the layers of grief show up for us on holidays, right? So This might be something maybe you've never articulated before, but there are things that holidays push on that you don't experience any other day of the year, right? Because it's just not in your face. You're grieving the motherhood that you imagined having, and you're seeing that in your face on Instagram, right? At least that's our perception, right? Again, that may not be their reality, but what we're seeing is the moms who have the quote unquote, I'm using air quotes right now, perfect children gathered around the table, the lovely cards that they made, the connection, the honor, all of those things. And you're having it slapped in your face that is something that you don't get to have. You're grieving the ease and the simplicity of parenting a child that's neurotypical or that doesn't have the challenges that your non-neurotypical child is experiencing. You're grieving being seen and understood. And I cannot overstate this. This is where so much of the pain is, because I remember, so many different holidays where I felt like I was just faking it through the whole thing. I did not feel seen. I felt like I'm just trying to get through this event so that I can leave, I can go home and pack up this mess of our family. And I felt so invisible. And I think so many parents do, so many mothers do, because we're trying to fit within a framework that actually was not built for us. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reverse engineering that. We're going to start the work of creating a Mother's Day that feels good to you again, okay? Parenting a child with ADHD, autism, PDA, anxiety, or ODD, and you are exhausted trying to figure out what's actually going on, I want you to hear this. Many of the kids I work with also struggle with symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, bloating, skin issues, or brain fog. And while it can feel like the behavioral and digestive pieces are separate, they're not. They are deeply connected. And that's why the Happy Tummies, Happy Kids program helps to resolve this problem. It is a 4-month root cause approach program that looks at your child's whole system through a functional lens, not to change who they are, but to improve their function and reduce suffering regardless of the diagnosis. If you're wondering whether this kind of support is right for your child, the next step is to book a Strong Start discovery call. It's a conversation with me to understand your child's unique needs and see if this program is a good fit for them. You can schedule a Strong Start discovery call using the link in the show notes. You don't have to figure this out alone, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. But part of this grief and part of why you find yourself scrolling past certain pages or just avoiding Instagram altogether is because you feel seen and misunderstood, because everybody else in front of you has a life that you're longing for that you may never have, right? You're grieving the relationships that have changed. Maybe in order to protect yourself and your family and your peace of mind, you no longer celebrate that with families or siblings anymore, or friends, right? And the other thing that we often are grieving on a holiday like this is our own capacity. I just don't have the capacity to sit through an event where I have to mask all day long. I have to pretend that I'm not hurting. I have to pretend that I'm okay with my kid, stimming in the corner when I'm not. Mother's Day can highlight not just what is, but everything that also is not at the same time. And it can be very, very painful. So unless we do the work of grieving, unless we do the work of owning, unless we do the work of honoring, we're going to continue to show up with anger and frustration and resentment on a day that really was meant for us. So I touched on this briefly, but I want to just mention it again. I think holidays are a comparison trap on all social media platforms, right? So we see the social media highlight reels. I mean, I have dozens of videos on my phone that I will never post on social media. The videos of the worst days with our daughter that I wanted to post because I wanted people to see, like, this is the hell we're living through right now. This is what our day-to-day looks like. And I just never could do it. And now it's something I won't do because my daughter has asked me not to. That is her right. And I will honor that till my last breath. However, when we don't see honest portrayals of what our life looks like, we automatically fall into a comparison trap, right? We see the social media highlight rules. We have church messaging that really centers around motherhood should be joyful, but that is one facet of the picture. Motherhood is suffering. Motherhood is surrender. Motherhood is grief. Motherhood is pain. There are so many things wrapped in motherhood beyond joy. And yes, you can have moments of joy and carry that with all of these other emotions as well. And then there are other cultural expectations of gratitude, depending on which culture you come from, right? What your ethnicity is. There might also be ethnic expectations of you. So for example, it might be that motherhood is not about you on Mother's Day. It's about your mother. And so it's all about the matriarch in the family and not the person actively mothering their children. Now, one of the things that I love that my mother-in-law did for me at the very beginning is, I got her a gift for Mother's Day and she said, I think I'm so thankful, but motherhood is about honoring the ones in the trenches. Like, you're the one raising the kids right now, And that really kind of challenged this perception that I had about what Mother's Day should be. And so there are cultural expectations maybe that are adding to a sense of pressure or a loss of joy. Comparison is not a mindset problem, but it is absolutely a nervous system trigger. And so if you know that Mother's Day is hard for you, that every year it's hard for you, then it's time to set some boundaries around what you let in to your environment leading up to that time. The Mother's Day ads, avoiding them. Avoid being on Instagram or only following the accounts that keep things real, right? This can often tie that nervous system trigger, right? That can trigger feelings of shame of, why is this so hard for me? Why is parenting different for me than all of these other moms that seem to have it together, right? My husband used to always kind of check me on that because he would say, like, look, they're not having to parent what you're having to parent right now. And so you have to stop comparing yourself because it's not the same. It is not the same journey. It is not the same parenting. It is not anything remotely similar. And I can say this with 100% confidence because I have a child that's neurotypical and I have a child that's not as a result of pandas. And so I've lived both. I've experienced both. I know what that's like. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that they are not the same journey. And so we can let go of that. It is okay to set a guard around your mind and around your heart in this tender place, because otherwise we're just exposing ourselves to unnecessary pain. You're already carrying enough as it is. You don't need somebody else to be poking on that pain, right? There is the invisible load of special needs motherhood that deserves to be seen. And this is something that often, unless maybe your spouse does this for you or you have a friend that can do this for you, that really requires you to honor this in yourself if nobody else can do it for you. And then communicate this to those that love you in your life so that they can learn to honor this in you as well. But there are things that you've had to do that nobody else has to, right? Or only the other special needs moms, they get it. That's the constant advocacy, the decision fatigue, the decisions of, the minutia of decisions, which is, am I going to challenge my child in this executive function task, or am I going to let them struggle? Am I going to overcompensate for my kid this morning by getting their socks and their shoes out when I know that they can do it for themselves? Or am I going to do it for them so that we don't have a fight in the morning, right? That's decision fatigue. And it's the minutia of decisions that other people don't have to make that causes real fatigue. Okay, emotional labor, right? And that is having to be somebody else's nervous system well beyond where it is age appropriate for them, meaning their developmental age doesn't match their physical age. Then we've got the hypervigilance. You guys, this is the hypervigilance that is always on edge. It is the I can never rest. My brain is always racing, or I'm able to sleep, but I wake up at 3:00 in the morning because my brain just won't shut up, right? That's the invisible load. And then, of course, there is the lack of true rest. Just like I said, where you're able to sleep, but your brain is still always on. And that is the invisible load that deserves to be honored on a day that just hurts. We're not just mothering, you're managing, you're anticipating, you're regulating, you're researching, you're holding everything together. And that deserves a soft place to land. So how do we practically do this on a day that just feels like not our day? This is like not the day I want to be living. This is not the day I want to be celebrating. This is painful. And when everybody is, demonstrating that it should look a certain way, I'm not feeling like celebrating here. I'm not feeling like being joyful, right? And so what we can do though, and this is where the faith piece comes into play, is acknowledging that God is present in our suffering, not just in our celebration. I talk about this a lot, how to actually engage with the Spirit of God through suffering in my book, Wrapped in Kindness. You can find that linked in the show notes. But how we do that is by recognizing that our God is a God of lament, the same way that He is a God of joy and celebration. He is with you in these moments where you don't feel like celebrating yourself. Scripture never denies grief. And actually, if I've been reading through the Old Testament since January and really getting just kind of a new taste, a new perspective on just how much mess humanity is, just how much pain we walk through, and just how committed God is to being present with us. He's present with us. You know, in Jewish culture, I had a friend and mentor who was a Messianic Jew, and she explained to me, you know, that in Judaism, we have a practice of regular lament. And lament is considered in their culture one of the highest forms of worship, because it's not something we'll be able to engage in heaven. In heaven, we'll be without sorrow, we'll be without pain. But on earth, we have the opportunity to worship Him through what is called lament. And what lament is even though, God, I trust you, even though, even when, God, I trust you, even when, God, you are good. That is what lament is. It's inviting the presence of God to be near to you, not denying your emotions or your experience, okay? This is not toxic positivity. God is not asking you to pretend that this day is easier. He wants to meet you in what is actually real. This is not the just be grateful for what you have when your life is falling apart and it looks so different than anything that you could have ever imagined. This isn't that. This isn't the toxic positivity that Lara and I talked about in our previous episode on seeing your child through a gospel lens. So make sure to go back and listen to that episode if you have not already. One of the biggest and most easily fixed issues that I see in parents raising neurodivergent children or parents of children with a complex medical diagnosis is actually mineral deficiencies and low electrolytes. When we are under chronic stress, as raising these children is chronically stressful, we run through our electrolytes and our minerals very, very quickly, which then puts a lot of stress on pretty much every organ system in the body. So one of the things that I teach a lot of the parents that I work with is a very quick action step, which is to just grab a scoop of electrolytes and add it to your water 1 to 2 times a day. It's one of the easiest ways that you can nourish your body so that you don't end up in a state of depletion. When we are mineral balanced, when our electrolytes are balanced, we sleep better, we respond to stress better, we bounce back a lot quicker from events that are really stressful. So one of the electrolytes that I use is Paleo Valley. They're super duper clean, no food coloring, no yucky ingredients, super affordable. I have a 15% off link for you in the show notes. One thing that you can do to care for yourself today is to grab some electrolytes, add it to your water, and remind yourself that you're worth nourishing too. So what does this look like? We've got to learn to approach this day differently, which means some active planning, right? This means like looking at things very, very differently. So for me, that actually looked like, what do I want this day to look and feel like versus what is actually possible right now? So for me, that meant I have a child who's really dysregulated at that time and sensory overstimulated, couldn't sit still for any length of time, had a lot of anxiety, couldn't ride in the car for any length of time because the noise vibration was just way too much for her brain. And the thought of having to drive somewhere for Mother's Day and make her sit there and like knowing that I would not be able to enjoy any of that, I just decided this is going to have to look different. Like there's no way for me to fit us into that box of what currently is. So we've got to recreate the box, right? And so that meant lowering expectations. And that also meant communicating with my husband and with my in-laws what that day needed to look like. So instead of maybe doing a whole family thing together, we said, hey, how about instead we'll get a babysitter for the littles and Reese and I will come over and we will celebrate Mother's Day that way. Or what we would also do is, Reese will go over and he will have his own time with the in-laws. And then I will go over and I will do something special with my mother-in-law for that day. And we can celebrate at a different time. And that worked for us. There were other times where just simply based on capacity, it was a no-go. And it was actually better to not celebrate during that time because we had years of flares back to back to back where neurologically things were not okay in our home for our daughter. And so it just wasn't possible. It wasn't possible to celebrate at all. And it just made a whole lot more emotional sense to just be like, this is like any other day. We're just not going to do that this way. Okay. Build in quiet moments for yourself. For me, I found a lot of enjoyment in going to coffee by myself, going to a coffee shop and reading by myself. And then again, planning around your child's capacity and doing this in a way that honors you, but does not lead to resentment. Okay. So meaning there were times where it was totally within my emotional capacity to say, you know what, I'm fine with just scrapping it this year. I don't feel like doing that. I don't feel like diving into this. I don't feel like putting in the extra effort. It's just not going to happen. And other years where I knew that I had the capacity to be disappointed, meaning if this goes really south and we have to pivot and we have to leave the in-laws' house immediately, do I have the capacity for that? If I do, then I'm going to allow for that to happen. Your day does not have to look traditional. It can be slow, simple, or even protective, meaning protecting your space. And I would just say that, if you have difficulty with your parents or in-laws, meaning that they don't respect your boundaries, that they don't understand you, they become offended when you say, I'm sorry, that really doesn't work for us, then it is 100% okay to invite your spouse to step in for you, meaning they can handle the communications as long as that doesn't aggravate things, right? And they can take that on. You don't need to also be managing that while protecting yourself. And of course, this is very individualized. If this is something you want personal coaching on, you can email me at andrea@abundantwellnesswithandrea.com. Sign up for a coaching session. I'd be happy to walk you through the nuances of that. And of course, you can also bring that to your counselor to discuss ways to actually navigate how to communicate this with family. So I want you to think as you're listening to this episode, let go of what you think Mother's Day should look like. Work through the grief of the disappointment of it not looking the way that you hoped that it would. Guard your heart on what you're watching and what you're allowing to feed into your system that leads to comparison, okay? And then create a day that makes sense for you and communicate that to the people around you, your spouse, your in-laws, whoever that may be, to bring back some joy to the day. And maybe Mother's Day gets reframed altogether as not calling it that, calling it something else. Maybe call it by your first name. Like mine would be Andrea's Day of Rest or something, where it just becomes about nourishing yourself, honoring the journey of parenthood that you've been on that is uniquely distinct to you, the difficulties, the challenges, the things you've overcome, right? All of that stuff really matters. So if today feels heavy, you're not broken. If it doesn't look like what you'd hoped for, you didn't fail. This is a journey that nobody signed up for and nobody could have prepared you for. You are carrying something that requires so much more than most people can see, and it deserves a place to land. So if you're feeling joy and grief on Mother's Day, if you're feeling like this season will never end, it will always feel intense, I want to just encourage you that healing happens in layers. And sometimes that means taking back a day that was built to look a certain way but no longer fits to you and creating a box that fits you and your life and honors the journey that you're on. Thank you for listening. I hope this encouraged you today.